Chapter 1: The Void Before Creation. Before the gods, before the stars, before even time itself, there was nothing. No sky to hold the sun, no earth to walk upon, no air to breathe. There was only an unfathomable abyss known as Ginnungagap, a yawning void where silence reigned and eternity echoed in absolute stillness. It was the birthplace of all and the grave of nothingness. But even within that empty silence, forces were stirring. On one side of Ginnungagap was Niflheim, the realm of ice and frost, where glaciers stretched endlessly and the cold was so ancient it could shatter time. On the other side was Muspelheim, a fiery expanse filled with churning flame, molten rivers, and searing winds that danced like living dragons. These two realms, fire and ice, were destined to collide. From the breath of Niflheim came freezing mists, curling like ghostly serpents into the void. From Muspelheim surged heat and sparks, golden embers streaking through darkness. When frost met flame, the great clash of opposites gave birth to something new. Where the mist thickened and froze, ice crystals formed, layer upon layer, until a mountain of glacial stone hovered within the heart of Ginnungagap. But the relentless heat from Muspelheim began to seep into the glacier, warming it with every heartbeat of flame. The ice began to melt, not in drips, but in thunderous waves. From within that ancient glacier, a colossal being stirred. He was not born nor made. He had always been, waiting to awaken. As the ice broke, Ymir, the first of all beings, emerged. A giant so vast that mountains could sleep beneath his limbs, his breath like storm winds. He was both terrifying and sacred, a being forged from contradiction. Ymir did not speak. He did not need to. His body radiated primal energy, ancient and unformed. And as he lay sleeping in the void, something extraordinary happened. He began to sweat. From his armpits, from the hollows of his body, life began to spill. New beings emerged from his very flesh. From the sweat of this sleeping titan came the first frost giants, towering and fierce, with hearts carved of ice and thunder in their veins. They roared into existence, wild and unshaped, born from a god who never asked to be worshipped, only endured. But Ymir was not alone. Alongside him, from the same melting ice, came another being. Not a warrior, not a giant, but a cow Audhumbla, the nourishing one. She stood radiant against the void, glowing with a strange warmth, her udder streaming for rivers of sweet milk into the abyss. This milk fed Ymir, keeping him alive as he dreamed. And while Ymir grew stronger, Audhumbla turned to a block of salt-covered ice nearby. She began to lick it, slowly, with the patience only a primordial creature could possess. With every stroke of her tongue, time itself seemed to pulse. Day after day she licked, and with every layer stripped away, something hidden within the ice began to emerge. It wasn't a monster, nor a giant, it was a man, a noble figure, glimmering with the potential of divinity. This was Buri, the ancestor of the gods. Buri's eyes opened for the first time within Ginnungagap, and he beheld the endless nothingness. Yet, unlike Ymir, Buri was not content to sleep or sweat. He would become the root of a new order. From him would come Bor, and from Bor the children who would change everything, Odin, Vili, and Vi. Even as life bloomed, the void remained chaotic. The frost giants multiplied, storming across the darkness, wild and untamed. And though Buri and his line represented something new, they were still surrounded by Ymir's brutal legacy, a realm of cold giants with no laws and no sky. Odin and his brothers watched this chaos, not with fear, but with deep frustration. There was no sun, no moon, no stars, only endless night and the howling of giants. They knew that creation required sacrifice, and that peace would only come through fire and blood. They turned their gaze to Ymir, their ancient forebear, and saw not a father, but a prison. From his vast body, they would carve the very world. The decision was made. The death of the first would become the birth of all. the silence of Ginnungagap would end. And so, within the timeless void, as ice dripped and fire flared, the first murder ignited the story of the cosmos. Odin lifted his weapon, and Vili joined him, and together they struck down the sleeping Ymir. The cosmos would never be the same again. Chapter 2: Birth of the Gods, Death of a Giant. The blow fell like the shattering of eternity. Odin, Vili, and stood over the lifeless body of Ymir, the first giant, the unwitting father of chaos. His death was not a moment but a cataclysm, a thunderclap that rippled through the void of Ginnungagap. And from that silence, a new vision would rise, a world not born but carved. Ymir's blood began to pour. Rivers of crimson, torrents of life and death mingled. His veins burst open like fractured glaciers, and the void flooded with oceans. The frost giants, his children, were caught in the deluge. Most were swept away, drowned by the wrathful tide of their own origin. Only 2 would survive, clinging to driftwood. Bergelmir and his wife, fated to repopulate their race. Where his blood formed seas, his flesh became land. Odin and his brothers sculpted continents from muscle and sinew. They shaped valleys from the folds of his skin, carved plains from his torso, and built the world's edges from the edges of his limbs. This was not just creation, it was transmutation, the breaking of a god to build a world. His bones they used to raise mountains. Each ridge and peak was set with purpose, and the tallest of them carried the memory of his spine. From his teeth and shattered jaws, they sewed boulders and cliffs. And then they reached upward, toward the skyless heavens, and saw only emptiness. The brothers took Ymir's skull and, with reverent strength, raised it high. It became the dome of the sky, a vast canopy stretching across the newborn world. To keep it from collapsing, they planted 4 mighty dwarves at its corners, beings born of decay and darkness. Nori, Suri, Austri, and Vestri, north, south, east, and west. But the sky alone was not enough. So they plucked sparks from Muspelheim, stealing light from the fire realm. These celestial embers were hurled into the firmament, some fixed in place to become stars, others left to wander as comets. And then they shaped the sun and the moon, gifting the sky with its rhythm. From Ymir's eyebrows they formed a great wall, a circular barrier to protect the human world, which they would call Midgard. It was a fortress of bone, separating the realm of man from the chaotic wilderness beyond. Beyond that barrier would lie the unknown, forests of beasts, lands of giants, and seas that never end. And within Midgard, the world was still empty. A beautiful landscape with no voices, no footsteps. The gods walked its shores and found driftwood at the edge of the sea, 2 simple logs. Yet they saw potential in their grain, their stillness, their form. And there, beneath the heavens, they breathed life into them. From the ash wood, they shaped the first man, and from the elm, the first woman. Odin gave them breath, Vili gave them mind and will, and shaped their senses, the ability to hear, to see, to speak. And so, from fallen timber, the first humans were born. Ask and Embla. Not gods, not beasts, but something entirely new. Ask and Embla opened their eyes beneath the stars and beheld the sky that once was a skull. They walked upon flesh turned to soil, drank from blood turned to rivers, and breathed the air born of divine sacrifice. Their lives were stitched into a tapestry of death and transformation, and they knew nothing of it. They simply lived. The gods watched them with wonder. Odin, most of all, felt a stirring in his heart. These were not toys or servants. They were creations, kin of a different kind. From that moment forward, Odin was no longer just a shaper of worlds. He became All-Father, the guardian of mankind. But this new world was not enough for gods who had tasted infinity. They needed a realm of their own, a home above all others. And so they built Asgard, high above Midgard, a gleaming realm of halls and palaces, where the divine could dwell. Its gates sparkled with gold, its walls shimmered with power. Asgard was set apart, unreachable by ordinary paths. To bridge the distance, they created Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, a burning arc of light that connected the heavens and earth. It shimmered with fire and magic, a divine causeway between the realm of gods and mortals. And thus order began to emerge from the chaos. 9 realms were formed across the branches of a great cosmic tree, Yggdrasil, the axis of all creation. Midgard nestled at its center, while Asgard crowned its upper limbs. The void was now a cosmos, and the silence of Ginnungagap was replaced with life. But creation born from destruction carries a shadow. Ymir's death had seeded the world with purpose, but also with tension. For the frost giants still lived beyond the walls, their resentment growing like storm clouds. And deep beneath the roots of the world tree, darker forces began to stir. Though the gods had built a universe, their greatest trials were yet to come. For every world forged from a giant's corpse, there would be another waiting to tear it down. And the echoes of Ymir's final breath still lingered, whispering through the winds of Midgard, reminding all who listened. The world was born in blood, and it would not forget. Chapter 3: The Rise of Asgard and the Divine Divide. The sky gleamed with the light of new stars. The sea settled over bones and blood, and Midgard thrived beneath its dome of wonder. But even as the world blossomed, Odin's mind was restless. He ruled Asgard with strength and wisdom, yet something haunted him, an emptiness not of power, but of knowing. He could feel it like a missing limb, the vast, aching distance between what was and what could be understood. Though he was all-father, he did not know all. And so Odin, cloaked in gray, left his throne and took up the mantle of a wanderer. With a wide-brimmed hat pulled low and a walking staff in hand, he began his secret journey through the realms. His destination lay beyond the comfort of Asgard, into the lands of ancient enemies, the frostbitten territory of the giants, known as Jotunheim. It was there, in the shadow of crags and ice, that the ancient being Mimir dwelled. Older than time, older even than Odin, Mimir sat beside a sacred well, the well of wisdom, hidden beneath the roots of Yggdrasil. The waters were deep, said to hold the memory of all things past and yet to come. But they were not freely given. Odin approached the well with reverence. He bowed not as a king but as a student. "Mimir," he said, "I seek the truth behind the stars, the secrets that bind fate to flesh. What must I offer to drink from the well?" Mimir did not smile. His eyes were as ancient as stone, and his voice echoed like wind over bones. "Wisdom," he said, "comes at a cost no crown can pay. If you wish to see the world clearly, you must give up part of your sight." Odin stood in silence. The cost was not symbolic. Mimir's terms were absolute. One eye, his eye, would be the price for vision beyond sight. The god nodded once solemnly. Without a cry, he drew a dagger from his cloak and plucked out his own eye. The pain was a roaring fire, his scream shaking the roots of Yggdrasil, echoing across the 9 realms. He dropped the bloodied eye into the well, and Mimir, satisfied, drew a horn from beneath his robes. He filled it with the sacred water and handed it to Odin. "Drink," he said. And no! Odin raised the horn to his lips and drank deep. The liquid burned through his throat, not like fire, but like light, searing, brilliant truth. Visions flooded his mind. He saw the birth of worlds and the death of stars. He saw Ragnarök, flashes of fire, the clash of giants and gods, the serpent coiled around the earth, the wolf that swallowed the sky. And he saw himself in the midst of it all, wounded, weary, but standing still. When he lowered the horn, the empty socket where his eye had once been no longer bled. It glowed, flickering with the fire of foresight. And though he had lost half his sight, he could now see farther than any living being. Thus, he became known not only as All-Father, but also as the One-Eyed God, the Seer of Fate, the Watcher in the Void. He returned to Asgard a changed being. wiser, quieter, and marked. The other gods beheld the fire in his eye and understood. Odin had paid a price no other would dare. But not all who watched were awed. For knowledge is power, and power breeds envy. The gods gathered in his hall, where gold-lined ceilings shimmered and mead flowed like rivers. Among them stood Odin's kin and closest Thor, his hammer-bearing son, storm in his veins, and Loki, his blood brother, the fire-tongued trickster, whose smile hid daggers. Loki said nothing of the glowing eye, but his thoughts crackled like embers in the dark. Yet Odin did not share all that he had seen. The future he glimpsed was heavy with sorrow. A wolf tearing through battlefields, a snake rising from the sea, a fire consuming the world tree, the laughter of gods turning to screams. But for now peace held. To ensure that peace, Odin began shaping a new kind of order. He gathered knowledge, runes, and magic from all corners of the cosmos. He bound secrets into poetry, into symbols, into spells. The world, though still young, had begun to grow teeth. And Odin knew that if the gods were to survive what he had seen, they would need more than strength. They would need understanding. So he sent ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, to fly over every realm each day and return to whisper all they saw. He stood beneath Yggdrasil, watching stars drift and men dream, knowing that wisdom was not a destination but a path carved in pain. And in the silence of his chambers, Odin sometimes touched the scar where his eye had been, not with regret, but with reverence. For in that sacrifice, the gods had gained something greater than a throne. They had gained a watchful guardian, a god who had stared into the abyss and learned to listen when it whispered back. Chapter 4. The War of the Gods, Aesir versus Vanir. The sky above Asgard glistened with stars, and the golden halls echoed with laughter. But beneath the surface, tensions festered. Not all gods walked the same path. While Odin ruled the Aesir with wisdom and might, a different clan of gods, the Vanir, flourished far away in their lush and fertile realm of Vanaheim. These were gods of earth and sea, of growth and sensual magic, and they were nothing like the proud warriors of Asgard. Where the Aesir built fortresses and wielded weapons, the Vanir tended to harvest and harmony. Yet both pantheons laid claim to the hearts of mortals. Prayers drifted to both skies, and temples rose in honor of both houses. Rivalry was inevitable, peace held only by a thread, and that thread frayed when a figure cloaked in flame crossed the realms. She called herself Gullveig, a sorceress of immense power, beautiful and terrifying. She entered Asgard and enchanted the Aesir. Her presence was a whisper of gold and shadow. But her magic was not gentle, it was dangerous. She spoke of greed and secrets, of the kind of power that demanded surrender. The Aesir, wary and proud, recoiled. They tried to destroy her. Once, twice, thrice, they cast her into fire, but each time she rose from the ashes, unburned and smiling. Her name changed with each return. Some called her Air, the Bright One, others simply the Unburned. But Odin saw something more, a test, or perhaps a trap. For Gullveig was beloved by the Vanir. When word of her treatment reached Vanaheim, outrage thundered across the realms. The Vanir accused the Aesir of treachery. The fragile peace shattered, and the heavens trembled as the first war of the gods began. Odin himself hurled the first spear, his declaration of war not written in words but cast in violence. Lightning flashed across the skies, and divine armies marched. On one side, the Aesir Odin, Thor, Tyr, gods of thunder and valor. On the other, the Vanir, Jord, Frey and Freya, gods of sea and sensual power, of fertility and fierce cunning. Mountains crumbled, rivers boiled. The very fabric of Yggdrasil trembled as gods clashed with gods. The Vanir brought down Asgard's walls. The Aesir answered with fire and blood. No side could conquer the other, and the longer the war raged, the more fragile creation became. Victory would mean nothing if only ashes remained. And so, After years of devastation, both sides paused. They stood among their fallen and realized what had been lost. More than buildings or battles, it was balance. The gods had nearly destroyed what they were meant to guard. And so they chose something bold, peace. To bind this uneasy truce, a sacred exchange took place. The Aesir sent Honor, a handsome god of presence, and Mimir, the wise one, to dwell among the Vanir. In return, the Vanir gave up their finest, Njord, the sea god, and his children, Frey and Freya. These gifts were not merely symbols, they were bridges between worlds. But the Vanir quickly saw through the illusion. Honor, though regal, was hollow without Mimir by his side. When asked for counsel, he hesitated, always stalling. "Let others decide," he would say. It became clear he was no true leader, only a figurehead. And worse, a deception. In fury, the Vanir took Mimir's life. They cut off his head and sent it back to Asgard as a warning. Peace built on lies cannot stand. Yet Odin, grieving the loss of his most trusted advisor, refused to let death silence wisdom. He used ancient runes and reawakened Mimir's head, preserving its mind and tongue with magic. From that day forward, he carried it with him, whispering truths only he could hear. A second peace was forged, this time, built not on promises, but on mutual respect. The Vanir gods were welcomed into the Aesir pantheon. Frey became a lord of sunlight and prosperity. Freya, the most beautiful of the Vanir, dazzled Asgard with her magic, her tears of gold, and her fierce independence. The great halls of Asgard now echoed with both thunder and song, war drums and harvest chants. Two tribes of gods had become one, but the memories of war lingered, like thunder in the distance. Unity had come at a great cost, and somewhere in the depths of the world tree, destiny stirred, watching, waiting. Because the gods had learned that even among immortals, peace was never eternal, it was only borrowed. And when the debt came due, the price would be paid in fire. Chapter 5: Loki's Mischief and the Forging of the Gifts. Beneath the radiant skies of Asgard, a golden-haired goddess named Sif slept peacefully in her chamber. Her long, flowing hair shimmered like a field of wheat touched by sunlight. To her husband, Thor, it was not merely beauty, it was sacred. It reminded him of the earth's bounty, of loyalty, of home. But not all in Asgard honored peace or beauty. In the shadows of the golden halls crept Loki, the trickster god. His heart, ever aflame with mischief, found boredom intolerable. Watching Sif's golden hair cascade around her, he felt the familiar tingle of temptation. He smiled to himself, a grin of chaos, and crept forward with silent glee. When dawn broke, Thor awoke beside Sif and gasped in horror. The goddess's golden hair was gone, shorn to the scalp. She wept in silence, covering her head in shame. Thunder cracked in the heavens as Thor's rage boiled over. His roars echoed through Asgard. Only one being was capable of such a senseless, wicked prank. "Loki!" he bellowed, and the sound shook the roots of Yggdrasil. The god of mischief was dragged into Thor's hall, trembling as the thunderer raised his mighty fist. But Loki, ever slippery, begged for mercy. "Give me time," he pleaded, "and I will not only restore her hair, I will replace it with something far greater." Thor's eyes burned with fury, but he lowered his hammer. "If you fail," he growled, "I will break every bone in your body and scatter you to the 9 realms. With his life hanging in the balance, Loki fled Asgard, diving deep into the earth to the realm of Svartalfheim, the land of the dwarves. There, he sought out the sons of Ivaldi, legendary smiths whose crafts rivaled the gods themselves. With a sly tongue and grand flattery, Loki challenged their pride. "The gods are hosting a contest," he lied, "to determine the greatest craftsman in the cosmos. The prize? Glory and divine favor." Intrigued, the dwarves accepted. The sons of Ivaldi forged 3 marvelous treasures. First, They created new hair for Sif, spun from living gold, finer than any silk, that would grow like real hair upon her head. Second, they forged Skidbladnir, a ship for Freyr that could fold small enough to fit into a pocket, yet expand to carry armies. And third, they shaped Gungnir, a spear for Odin that never missed its mark. Satisfied, Loki took the gifts and ran, but Mischief gnawed at him still. He turned to another pair of dwarves, Brokkr and Sindri, and whispered a challenge. The sons of Ivaldi have already won the gods' favor. I bet you cannot make anything better. The dwarves scoffed. If we win, we take your head. My head is yours, Loki said with a smirk. If you can outforge the sons of Ivaldi. But fear crept in. Brokkr and Sindri were brilliant. Too brilliant. Loki transformed into a stinging fly and returned to their forge, intent on sabotage. As Sindri worked the bellows, Loki flew in and stung his hand, his neck, his eyelids. The dwarf winced, cursed, bled, but he did not stop. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and from the flames rose 3 gifts. Draupnir, a golden ring that multiplied itself every 9th night. Gullinbursti, a golden-bored beast that ran faster than any horse, lighting the dark. And finally, Mjolnir, the hammer. Though its handle was shorter than intended, Mjolnir was a weapon of unimaginable power. It would always return to its wielder's hand, never miss, and could crush mountains. With this, the dwarves had outdone the gods, and Loki, as usual, had outplayed himself. He returned to Asgard, delivering all the gifts with flair. Odin accepted the spear and the ring. Freyr received the ship and boar. Sif's golden hair shimmered once more, drawing gasps from all who beheld her. And Thor held the hammer. Thunder rumbled in his chest as he gripped Mjolnir for the first time. The power surged through him, and a smile curled beneath his red beard. With this, he said, no giant shall stand before me. But Brokkr had not forgotten the bet. Now, he said, stepping forward, we take your head. Loki, ever the wordsmith, laughed. Ah yes, you may have my head but not my neck. That was not part of the deal. The gods, amused by the trick, sided with Loki. Brokkr, fuming, could not remove the head, but he could silence the mouth. With coarse thread and a searing needle, he stitched Loki's lips shut. The trickster's smile was finally silenced. For a time. And so, the gods of Asgard received gifts that would shape the fate of the world. From mischief came magic, from insult came power, and from chaos came creation. But even then, they should have known, when Loki smiles, the price is never fully paid. Chapter 6. The Journey to Jotunheim. Snow fell gently over the silver roofs of Asgard as Thor tightened the straps of his belt and summoned his chariot, pulled by 2 mighty goats, Toothgnasher and Toothgrinder. Their hooves cracked the stone beneath them as they snorted lightning and shook their manes. Beside him stood Loki, sly as ever, grinning as if mischief already danced ahead of them. The gods were bound for Jotunheim, land of the giants, where challenge and chaos awaited. Thor's hammer hung at his side, humming softly with storm power. They would not go alone. A boy named Thjalfi, once a mortal, now Thor's loyal servant, joined the journey. He had earned his place after a lesson in humility. A tale of broken goat bones, marrow stolen in hunger, and divine mercy exchanged for servitude. The gods forgave, but they never forgot. Their path led them beyond the safety of Bifrost, across frozen wastes and ancient forests. Asgard faded behind them, replaced by cragged hills and whispering winds. Jotunheim was a place untouched by order, where mountains groaned and skies thundered without cause. It was a realm where even gods felt small. Night crept in, cold and biting. Searching for shelter, they came upon a peculiar cave, vast, dark, and hollow. They entered, grateful for cover, but unease hung in the air. The cave seemed too perfect, too deliberate. They lay down to rest, but the ground trembled beneath them, and the very walls seemed to breathe. A rumble like thunder shook the earth. Thor sprang to his feet and stepped outside, eyes searching the darkness. From the cliff's edge, he saw something that made even the thunder god pause. A giant, asleep upon the land like a fallen mountain. His breath was the wind, his snores the storm. His name was Skrymir, and he was no ordinary foe. The gods realized the cave they had slept in was no cave at all. It was Skrymir's glove, discarded like a forgotten toy. The giant awoke, yawning, and blinked down at the tiny travelers beside his hand. "Ah, little ones," he said, "I'll carry your supplies if you wish. The road ahead is long." Despite his size, Skrymir seemed friendly, almost dim. The gods reluctantly agreed. He packed their belongings into his satchel. A leather bag so tightly knotted not even Thor could open it. That night, as Skrymir slept, Thor's rage swelled. 3 times he raised Mjolnir and struck the giant's skull. But Skrymir stirred only slightly. He murmured. "Leaves must be falling." Thor stood breathless, baffled. No one, no thing had ever withstood Mjolnir without injury. And yet, here was a giant who slept through divine wrath. Morning came, and Skrymir pointed them onward. "Your destination lies beyond," he said. "The fortress of Utgard, home to the greatest of Jotunheim's champions. But be warned. There, even illusions can break gods." The gods journeyed forward and soon reached the gates of Utgard Loki's castle. It was vast, otherworldly, and strange. Inside, giants laughed and drank, but their king, the cunning Utgard Loki, welcomed them with a glint in his eye. "Ah, Asgardians," he said, "so you believe yourselves mighty? Then prove it." He issued challenges, one for each traveler. Loki was first, tasked to eat faster than the king's servant. The god devoured meat and bone alike, but the servant consumed everything, bone, plate, and table. Loki lost. Next came Thjalfi, swiftest of mortals. He raced against a boy who seemed lazy and awkward, but Thjalfi lost every time, no matter how fast he ran. He collapsed, panting, heart-shattered. Then the king turned to Thor. 3 challenges. First, drain a horn of mead in 1 gulp. Thor drank deeply, but the level barely dropped. "You sip like a maiden," the king mocked. Second, lift a cat from the floor. Thor grunted, straining, but could only raise 1 paw. Laughter roared through the hall. Third, wrestle an old woman. Thor, humiliated, stepped forward. The woman was bent with age, thin as bone. But as they grappled, her strength was inhuman. Thor pushed, roared, strained, and fell to 1 knee. He had been bested. Shamed and confused, the gods turned to leave. But outside the castle, Utgard Loki revealed the truth. "All you saw was illusion. Loki ate against wildfire, a force that consumes all." Thjalfi raced a thought, and Thor, "The horn drew from the ocean. You lowered sea levels with each sip." "The cat?" The king smiled. "That was no cat, but the Midgard serpent, coiled around the world. And the old woman, she was old age itself. None can defeat her, not even you, Thunderer." Thor clenched his hammer, furious. But before he could strike, the giant vanished, castle and all. Illusion melted into air, and the gods stood alone. Defeated not by strength, but by cunning. Thor's pride was wounded, but a fire had been lit within him. From that day forward, he vowed he would face the Midgard serpent again. But not with illusions, not with tricks, with thunder and rage. And this time, no one would vanish before the blow fell. Chapter 7. Thor the Bride. The skies above Asgard roared with confusion. Thunder crackled not from storm clouds, but from Thor himself. The god of thunder paced furiously through the great hall of Valasjaf, his footsteps like earthquakes. His hammer, Mjolnir, was gone, vanished from his side like a stolen soul. No enemy was powerful enough to best him in combat. No trickster had been seen near, yet there it was, his most sacred weapon, the hammer that had crushed mountains and scattered giants, stolen in silence. And in its place, a note written in jagged runes. If you want your hammer back, come to Jotunheim and we shall negotiate. Thrym. Thrym. A brutish giant lord, proud and stupid in equal measure. He had not dared open war against Asgard, but he had done something worse. He had demanded Freya, goddess of love and beauty, as payment for Mjolnir's return. The idea alone made the halls shake with disbelief. Odin summoned the gods to council. Freya was livid. Her golden necklace, Brisingamen, trembled as she shouted, "Do you think I would marry that beast to save your hammer? Let him swallow it. Let him choke on it." The gods stood in silence. Mjolnir was the cornerstone of their defense. Without it, Asgard was vulnerable to all. Then came a voice from the shadows. Loki stepped forward, smiling the way only he could. There might be another way. All eyes turned. Thrym wants a bride. Let's give him one. A goddess cloaked in glory, wrapped in white. He paused. Let's give him Thor. The hall went still. Thor's face turned redder than his cloak. You want me to dress like a bride? He bellowed. To wear silk? A veil? Shall I carry flowers while I break every bone in his body? But as the laughter died down, Odin placed a heavy hand on his son's shoulder. We have no choice. Thor stood before the mirror, scowling at his reflection. His beard had been tucked beneath layers of fabric. A sparkling tiara sat crooked on his head, and his eyes, glowing with rage, were barely hidden by the bridal veil. Beside him, Loki adjusted the train of the wedding dress, now shape-shifted into a handmaiden, gleeful and elegant. Together they rode the goat-pulled chariot to Jotunheim. The earth trembled beneath them, a bride and her maid trailing lightning. The giants welcomed them with thunderous cheers. Thrym, blind with lust and glory, approached. Ah, my beautiful Freya, at last you are mine. A feast was held in honor of the wedding. Thor sat silently, seething. But when food was brought, he could no longer contain himself. He devoured an entire ox, ate salmon, all the desserts, and downed barrels of mead. Thrym blinked, baffled. Such appetite. I have never seen a woman eat like this. Loki, ever the silver tongue, laughed delicately. She has not eaten for 8 days. So eager was she to be your bride. The giants nodded in admiration, and Thrym leaned close to steal a kiss, but drew back when he saw Thor's burning eyes beneath the veil. What fiery gaze, he cried. Why do you glare at me so? Loki whispered smoothly. She hasn't slept in days, dreaming of this very moment. The passion. It burns in her. Thrym, enchanted, smiled. Bring the hammer. Let the bride be wed with honor. The giants brought forth Mjolnir, placing it in the bride's lap as a ceremonial blessing. And in that moment, Thor's patience shattered like glass. He tore off the veil. You wanted a bride? He roared. Here she is. With a howl of fury, he leapt from the bench, seized his hammer, and the skies exploded. Mjolnir sang through the air, striking with the fury of a storm long denied. Thrym's skull shattered like a melon. The hall became a battlefield. The giants screamed, but Thor was unstoppable. Lightning made flesh. One by one, he crushed them all, sending their fortress crumbling around them. Loki stood behind him, wiping blood from his borrowed gown. Well, he smirked, that was quite the honeymoon. As Thor walked away, dress torn, veil trailing behind him like smoke, he grumbled. Next time I wear armor. Loki chuckled. But you make such a radiant bride. Thor shot him a glare that could split mountains, but even he had to smirk. And so Mjolnir returned to Asgard, bathed in vengeance. The gods toasted Thor not just as the god of thunder, but as the bride of vengeance, the storm in silk. And for many moons, laughter echoed through the mead halls at the tale of Thor's most unexpected transformation. Chapter 8. The Children of Loki, Monsters Born of Chaos. There are gods who shape worlds, and there are those who unmake them. Among the Aesir, none walked the line between creation and destruction more dangerously than Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the whisperer of change. His mischief had once brought laughter, but now it would give birth to something darker. Loki had a wife in Asgard, Sigyn, loyal and gentle, who bore him sons. But far beyond the golden halls, in the cold wilderness of Jotunheim, he had a lover of another kind. Her name was Angerboda, a fearsome giantess with eyes like obsidian and a soul forged in the howling winds. With her, Loki fathered not children but prophecies. The first was a serpent, black-scaled and cold-eyed. From the moment it uncoiled, it grew, rapidly, relentlessly. Coiling through the ironwoods, it devoured beasts, drank rivers, and left a trail of venom. The gods would come to know it as Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, destined to one day encircle the world and rise at its end. The second was a girl, beautiful on one side and decaying on the other. Her face was half alive and half rotting, one eye gleaming with life, the other sunken and hollow. She spoke softly to the dead and turned away from the living. This was Hel, child of twilight, queen of shadows, ruler of the underworld. The third was a wolf, a pup at first, fierce and curious, with fire in his gaze and thunder in his howl. His name was Fenrir, and even as a cub he frightened the gods. They watched him grow, not just in size, but in power, in hunger, in rage, and with every breath, the prophecy around him grew louder. Odin sat on his throne in Asgard, staring into the distance with his one-seeing eye. He had drunk from Mimir's well, and in his visions he saw the end of days, Ragnarök, where gods would fall, where fire and ice would clash. And in those dreams he saw three shadows leading the charge. Loki's children. The gods acted swiftly. Hel was banished to Niflheim, where she would rule over those who died not in battle, but in bed, in sickness, in sorrow. She built her realm from bones and silence. Hel accepted her exile without a word, for she had always belonged to the dead. Jormungandr was hurled into the sea, cast beyond the edge of Midgard. There, in the crushing depths, he grew so large that he wrapped around the world. Eventually, his tail met his jaws, and he bit down. Not from hunger, but from inevitability. The world serpent had become a ring around existence. But Fenrir was not exiled. No, the gods brought him to Asgard. They told themselves it was to raise him under watchful eyes, to teach him loyalty. But deep down they feared him. Even young, he was larger than any beast, stronger than any warrior, and more cunning than they had expected. Only one god dared approach him without fear, Tyr, the god of war and justice. Tyr fed Fenrir, spoke to him, played with him. The wolf trusted him. And perhaps, in some strange way, Tyr loved him. But love is not enough to stop fear from growing. The gods decided Fenrir must be bound. They forged chains of iron and challenged him with games. "Can you break free?" they asked. Laughing, Fenrir shattered the first chain. Then the second. Each stronger than the last, and each broken more easily than before. Desperate, the gods turned to the dwarves, master smiths of the unseen. In secret, the dwarves forged a ribbon, soft as silk and strong as fate. It was made not from metal, but from impossibilities. The sound of a cat's footsteps, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, and the spit of a bird. They named it Gleipnir. The gods returned with their ribbon and asked Fenrir to test it. The wolf, sensing deceit, grew wary. "If you mean no harm," he said, "then let one of you place a hand in my mouth as a token of trust." The gods froze. Only Tyr stepped forward. Tyr looked into Fenrir's eyes. Without a word, he placed his hand between the wolf's jaws. Fenrir allowed the gods to bind him with Gleipnir, and when he struggled, he found that he could not break it. He had been betrayed. He howled in fury and bit down. Tyr's hand was severed. He did not scream. He only looked away as the wolf thrashed, bound to a stone by a leash of lies. Fenrir roared, not in pain, but in vengeance. "You could have had me as a brother," he howled. "But now I will return as your end." The gods left him there, bound in the darkness, his mouth chained shut with a sword wedged in his jaws. But prophecy never sleeps. Fenrir would break free. Jormungandr would rise. Hel would march with an army of the dead. And Loki, their father, would stand beside them, smiling at the ruin he once birthed in love. Chapter 9. Thor and the Sea Serpent, the battle that almost was. Storms gathered far from Asgard, where the sea met the sky in endless gray. Thor stood at the edge of the world, his hammer pulsing with electricity. Beneath him the waves boiled, not with weather, but with something far older, something ancient and patient, something coiled in the blackness beneath the tide. Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, lay curled around the roots of the world, his body encircling it like a belt of doom. Born of Loki, raised by salt and silence, the serpent's very breath was poison. Even the gods dared not disturb him. But Thor was not like the others. There was an ancient hatred between them. Perhaps it had no beginning, only destiny. The serpent, bound to the sea. Thor, bound to thunder. They were fated enemies. Odin had seen it in visions. One would slay the other at Ragnarök. But sometimes fate demands a rehearsal before the final act. One day, disguised in the garments of a mortal, Thor traveled to the land of the giant Hymir, a grim-faced fisherman with eyes like storm clouds. Thor knocked on his door, offering strength in exchange for a place on his boat. Hymir laughed. "The sea holds beasts that even the gods should fear." But Thor insisted. At dawn they set sail. The ocean yawned open before them, an endless abyss. Hymir cast his lines and caught whales with ease. But Thor did not fish for flesh. He reached into the boat, tore off the head of Hymir's prized ox, and skewered it onto a massive hook. Blood dripped into the depths. They waited in silence. The skies darkened. The waves stilled. And then, the water began to rise, not from wind, but from something moving beneath them. The boat rocked violently. Thor's line pulled taut. The ox head was gone. Something was climbing. A shape broke the surface, vast, scaled, monstrous. Jormungandr had taken the bait. The serpent's eyes were pits of glowing green. Its mouth gaped wider than the ship, venom drooling like rivers. Thor braced his feet and began to pull. With every ounce of divine fury, Thor hauled the line. The muscles in his arms bulged like coiled ropes. Lightning crackled in the sky as the sea god roared. Jormungandr rose, body lashing through the waves like a godless mountain. For the first time since creation, the two stared each other in the eye. Thor raised Mjolnir high. His arm trembled with wrath. The hammer sang with ancient power, ready to strike. But just as he prepared to end the serpent's reign, the boat rocked violently. Hymir, overcome with terror, slashed the line. The serpent slipped beneath the waves, vanishing into the deep. The ocean fell still once more. Thor turned to the giant, fury blinding his eyes. "You fool!" he roared. "We could have ended this. I had him." Hymir cowered beneath Thor's glare. But it was too late. The moment had passed. Jormungandr had returned to the deep, wounded, perhaps, but alive. And fate had not yet called for his death. Not today. Thor sat in silence as the boat drifted back to shore. The storm above him calmed, but the storm within him did not. He knew now what his father had seen. The next time they met, there would be no interruptions. No disguises. No bait. Just a god, a serpent, and the end of all things. As they reached land, Thor said nothing. He stepped from the boat, Mjolnir humming beside him like a living storm. Jormungandr waited in the depths, silent once more. But both knew they had glimpsed their fate, and the ocean would never forget the day thunder nearly broke the world. Chapter 10. The death of Balder. Light falls into shadow. There was a god whose name alone brought warmth to Asgard. Balder, the son of Odin and Frigg, walked with the grace of sunlight and the kindness of spring. Wherever he passed, shadows receded. His laughter was music, his presence a balm. He was beloved by gods and mortals alike, and in him the gods saw the last innocence of the world. But even light can be hunted by darkness. One night, Balder awoke screaming. He had dreamed of his own death, of falling into darkness, of blood and silence, of flames consuming the world. His voice trembled as he spoke of it, and the dream spread like a chill wind through the halls of Asgard. Frigg, goddess of motherhood and foresight, could not bear the thought of losing her son. She rode to the ends of the realms, pleading with every being and every object to swear never to harm Balder. Fire, water, stone, trees, beasts, metals, all took an oath. Nothing would touch him. He became invulnerable, and with that the gods rejoiced. In the halls of Asgard a game began. Gods would throw stones and spears at Balder, fire arrows at him, and watch them bounce harmlessly away. The halls rang with laughter, and Balder, ever gentle, never complained. The Aesir marveled. A god untouched by pain, but far away, in a shadowed corner, someone watched without joy. Loki, father of monsters, brother of Odin, changer of forms, had begun to hate what Balder represented. He hated the joy, the light, the perfection. And worse, he hated being left out of the secret oaths. Disguised as an old woman, Loki crept to Frigg's side and asked her, in a voice soaked with false concern, did all things swear to protect him? Frigg, weary and unaware, replied, all but one, a little thing too young to matter. A shoot of mistletoe growing west of Valhalla. It seemed too innocent, too soft. Loki smiled, and the woman vanished. In the forest he found it, the slender, pale branch of mistletoe, trembling in the breeze like a breath on glass. He broke it with gentle hands and returned to the feast. The gods were still at play, but one of them stood aside. Hr, Balder's blind brother, silent in the corner, unable to join the games. Loki approached him with a crooked smile. Why don't you join the fun? Hr gestured to his eyes. Because I cannot see where to throw. Loki pressed the mistletoe into his hand. Let me guide your aim. Just this once. There was a pause, a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Then Hr threw. The silence that followed was unnatural. The mistletoe flew like a whisper and struck Balder in the chest. Pierced him. The god of light staggered. His eyes, wide, confused, met the sky and then he fell. He did not move again. A scream tore from Frigg's lips. Odin clenched his fists as if he could hold back fate itself. The gods rushed to Balder's side. But there was no wound to heal, no breath to restore. Light itself had died. The gods wept for 9 nights. Nothing in Asgard was bright anymore. Flowers withered. Birds fell silent. Even the sun seemed dimmer. Odin rode to the underworld, to the cold halls of hell, and begged her to return his son. She agreed, but only if all things in existence wept for Balder. And so the gods traveled the realms. Trees wept. Mountains cried. Even stones and beasts shed tears. All did, except one. A giantess in a cave, cold and unmoved, said, let hell keep what is hers. She was Loki, again in disguise, and with that denial Balder remained in the land of the dead. Odin returned in silence. His shoulders bore the weight of prophecy. Balder was more than a son. He had been a symbol. His death was the first crack in the shield that held Ragnarök at bay. The light had fallen, and shadow had entered the gates of Asgard. From that day on, laughter faded. The gods watched the skies with dread, for Balder would not rise again until the end. And when he returned, it would not be to the world they knew, but to the ashes of what had been. Chapter 11, Loki's Fall, from Trickster to Traitor. The death of Balder left Asgard hollow. The golden halls once filled with laughter now echoed with silence. Where joy had reigned, suspicion began to bloom. The gods whispered behind closed doors, their eyes drawn always to the one who stood apart, too calm, too still. Loki. No one could prove his crime, not yet. He had returned to his usual form, blending back into the court of Asgard, speaking in riddles and jest. But behind every word, there was a shadow. Behind every smile, a dagger. The truth crept in slowly, like frost under a door. First came a whisper, then a certainty. Odin, wise and weary, called for Loki. The trickster came, smirking, but Odin said nothing. He only stared. Loki's smile faltered. The All-Father rose. "You brought ruin to this house," he said, his voice heavy as thunderclouds. "You who sat at our table. You who called me brother." The gods surrounded Loki like a closing storm. He turned to run, and run he did. From the glittering heights of Asgard to the cold corners of the world, Loki vanished. He slipped through forests, dove through rivers, climbed peaks no god dared to follow. He changed shape, hawk, salmon, shadow. But the gods would not rest until he was bound. He found refuge in the mountains, deep within a cavern where sunlight never touched the stone. There he built a home with Sigyn, his loyal wife. She stayed by his side even as his crimes chased them like wolves. They had once had children here, gentle, fragile. But fate had marked them too. The gods descended upon the cave in a storm of fire and fury. Thor led the charge. Loki, in the form of a salmon, twisted and leapt through the streams. But Thor's hand was fast. He caught him by the tail, and with that grip, the god of mischief's final escape ended. Even now, the tapered tail of the salmon is said to bear the shape of that grasp. Loki was dragged in chains before the gods. No trial, no pleas, only judgment. "You will not die," said Odin. "Not yet. Death is mercy. You shall endure until the end." They bound him deep beneath the earth, far below the roots of Yggdrasil. There, in the cavern of shadows, they laid him upon 3 flat stones. From the entrails of his slain son, they bound him fast. A serpent was hung above his face, its mouth dripping venom. Each drop burned like fire. Loki writhed and screamed, his cries shaking the roots of the world. Only Sigyn remained. Day and night, she held a bowl to catch the venom. When she turned to empty it, a drop would fall, and Loki's screams would become earthquakes. The gods returned to Asgard, heavy-hearted. The trickster was silenced, but the damage was done. The harmony of the realms had fractured. With Balder in Hel's realm and Loki bound beneath the earth, the balance had tipped. In dreams, Odin saw the end drawing nearer. The serpent would rise. The wolf would break its chains. And Loki, still screaming in the dark, would one day break free. His laughter louder than ever before. In the silence of that cavern, beneath mountains and moonlight, Loki lay, chained not just by the gods, but by the consequences of his own fire. And yet, even there, even broken, his eyes burned, not with regret, but with revenge. Chapter 12. The gathering storm, signs of Ragnarök begin. Time in Asgard flowed differently than in the mortal world. Years passed like dreams, but even in eternity there are echoes, soft, distant at first, then louder. Ragnarök, the end of all things, was once only a whisper in the corners of Odin's dreams. Now it stirred in the waking world. The first omen came not with thunder, but with silence. The Fimbul winter, a winter so deep, so long that no spring followed. Snow fell endlessly, crops withered, and brothers turned on brothers in mortal realms. War became a storm, and morality vanished beneath frost and famine. In Asgard, the gods watched helplessly. The warmth that had once radiated from Baldur's presence was gone. The sky grew colder, the stars dimmer, the branches of Yggdrasil creaked and groaned. Even the world tree seemed to shiver, as if something ancient stirred in its roots. The second sign came from within the tree itself. The Norns, the spinners of fate, appeared less and less. Their waters at the well of Ward grew dark and thick. Threads of destiny snapped in their fingers. When asked what would come, they only said, "The wolf stirs." Beneath the earth, Loki twitched in his chains. Venom fell. His wife, Sigyn, trembled as she held her bowl, but her hands began to falter. Drops landed on Loki's flesh, and each drop awakened something old, something furious. His mind fractured like ice under strain. His eyes, even through the pain, burned with the shape of vengeance. Far across the sea, in the deepest part of the ocean, Jormungandr stirred. The serpent that circled the world grew restless. Its coils tensed. It rolled in its sleep, causing tidal waves across the coasts of Midgard. The seas boiled with venom. Sailors whispered of a shape beneath the surface that opened one glowing eye and vanished. In the iron forests, another terror grew. Fenrir, bound with the impossible ribbon Gleipnir, snarled and howled. His muscles rippled. The gods had thought him subdued, but slowly, quietly, the leash began to strain. Rocks cracked. Chains trembled. Fenrir's eyes turned toward the sky, and he remembered betrayal. Hel, in her kingdom of the dead, watched in silence. Her armies, souls forgotten by Valhalla, rose without breath, without warmth. She said nothing, but at her feet, the ship Naglfar began to take form. Made from the nails of the dead, it grew with every burial, with every death in Midgard. Even the sun and moon felt the pull of doom. From the darkness came two wolves, Skoll and Hati, who had chased the celestial bodies for ages. Now they closed in. Each day, the sun grew dimmer, the moon paler. One day soon, they would be caught, and light would vanish from the sky. Odin knew what all of this meant. He stood alone atop his throne, watching the 9 realms tremble. He had sacrificed so much, his eye, his blood, his peace, to delay this day. But it could not be stopped. Not forever. He rode to Mimir's well once more, seeking wisdom. He spoke to the severed head of his ancient friend and asked what could be done. Mimir was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he whispered, "No victory, only renewal. But first, fire." The gods began to prepare. They reforged weapons, trained in secret halls, called forth ancient pacts with forgotten beings. Odin summoned the Einherjar, the dead warriors of Valhalla, to ready themselves. Thor gripped Mjolnir tighter with every passing day. But fear crept even into the hearts of immortals. For the final sign had not yet arrived, but they could feel it, hovering at the edge of time. When Loki's chains would break, when the wolf would run free, when the serpent would rise from the sea. That would be the hour. And so the world waited. The sky grew darker, the ground colder, and the gods, who had once danced and feasted beneath eternal stars, stood silent, staring at the horizon, where the first flame of Ragnarök flickered in the frost. Chapter 13. The Doom of the Gods, Ragnarök begins. It began not with a roar, but with a snap, a sound like a thread breaking at the edge of the universe. Deep beneath the earth, in a cavern soaked with venom, Loki's chains broke. The serpent above him shrieked and fled. Sigyn cried out, but the trickster had already risen, smiling with blood in his teeth. He emerged into a world covered in frost. The sky cracked with red veins. Trees died standing. The wind carried screams from across Midgard. And Loki, now free, raised his hands not to thank the gods, but to summon his army. In Hel's dark realm, the ship Naglfar completed its form. Made of the fingernails and toenails of the dead, it loomed like a grave on water. Hel stepped aboard, her one eye gleaming, the other dark as rot. She commanded legions, souls denied peace, warriors drowned and forgotten, mothers lost in childbirth, kings without crowns. They followed her in silence. The skies churned. The wolves Skoll and Hati lunged. In one terrible instant they caught their prey. Skoll devoured the sun. Hati swallowed the moon, and the world fell into twilight. Night became endless, and stars wept from the sky like burning tears. The sea exploded. From the depths Jormungandr rose. His coils unwrapped around the world, and as he emerged, he spat venom into the sky and sea. Birds fell from the air. Fish floated to the surface, dead before they could flee. He reared his massive head toward the land, and hissed. Then came the howling. From his stone prison, Fenrir broke free. Gleipnir snapped like dry grass. The wolf's paws crushed mountains. His eyes blazed with the memory of betrayal. His mouth stretched so wide, it touched the heavens and the earth. With each step he brought the end closer. And from Muspelheim, the land of fire, came Surtur the fire giant, the destroyer. In his hands he carried a flaming sword that shimmered like the sun. Behind him rode a host of fire demons, and before them, even the Bifrost bridge could not hold. It shattered into colorless ash. The gods gathered on the fields of Vigrid, a plain vast enough for the end of all things. Odin rode at the front on Sleipnir, clad in black armor, his one eye burning with resolve. Beside him were Thor, Freyr, Tyr, Heimdall, Frigg, and the warriors of Valhalla. No speeches, no war cries, just silence and breath. Across the field Loki appeared, his children beside him. The Midgard serpent coiled behind him. Fenrir growled, licking the air. Hel stared with her cold, dead eye. And from the fire Surtur raised his blade. For a moment, everything paused, as if the universe took one final breath. Then it began. Heimdall blew Gjallarhorn, the trumpet of fate. Its sound split mountains, shattered glass, and shook the roots of Yggdrasil. The moment the sound faded, the armies charged. The sky turned black. The earth split. Time collapsed. Odin clashed with Fenrir, spear against Fong. Tyr fought the hound Garm, both knowing it would be their final battle. Freyr faced Surtur without his magic sword, having gifted it long ago, and fell in flames. Loki met Heimdall blade to blade, brother against brother, and they struck each other down in mutual ruin. And Thor found Jormungandr. The serpent rose like a mountain of death. Lightning and venom filled the sky as god and beast collided. Thor smashed Mjolnir into its skull. Again and again. Finally, Jormungandr fell, body shuddering across the land. But the serpent's venom was already in Thor's lungs. He staggered 9 steps. Then the thunder god fell beside the monster he had slain. Above it all, Surtur raised his sword one final time. He plunged it into the sky, and the world caught fire. Flames consumed the trees, the oceans boiled, and the stars themselves went dark. It was not just war, it was undoing. The gods had fought bravely, but fate does not care for courage. Ragnarök had come, and the world burned. Chapter 14, The Final Ember, Death and Rebirth. The battlefield of Vigrid was gone. Fire had consumed it, and the air was nothing but smoke and memory. The sky was black, not with clouds, but with emptiness. No stars, no moon, no sun. Only silence. The gods had fallen. The monsters were gone. The 9 realms lay in ruin. The great ash tree, Yggdrasil, groaned with death. Its branches had been scorched, its roots cracked, but it still stood bare, trembling, but alive. Beneath its roots, hidden in a silent cave, 2 human figures stirred. Lif and Lifthrasir, a man and a woman, had survived Ragnarök by drinking the dew of Yggdrasil and hiding from fire and frost alike. They were not heroes or warriors. They were simply survivors. And from their breath would come the breath of future generations. Above them, the seas began to calm. The smoke thinned. The flames died. The world, once devoured by fire and flooded by tears, now rested. In the ash and soot soil remained. And from that soil green began to grow. The sun returned, reborn from the ashes of its mother. A new star rose in the sky, golden and warm. It was the daughter of the old sun, shining over a world that had never seen her light before. The sky remained quiet, as if mourning what had passed, but welcoming what might come. Balder, the god of light, who had once fallen from the height of joy to the depths of death, returned from Hell's realm. He walked the new earth barefoot, smiling softly. Hr, his blind brother, walked beside him, forgiven and no longer burdened by fate. They had been enemies once. Now they were kin in rebirth. From the mist of time came Vidar and Vali, sons of Odin, untouched by war. They carried no crowns, only memories. Modi and Magni, sons of Thor, found Mjolnir in the ash and lifted it together. In their hands, thunder lived on, not as vengeance, but as protection. But Odin was gone. Thor was gone. Loki, Fenrir, Jormungandr, all consumed in the fire they helped unleash. The old age of gods had ended. The great myths had been written in blood and flame, and now only echoes remained. What came next would belong not to gods, but to people. Yggdrasil, though wounded, began to heal. Its branches reached slowly toward the sky, and leaves began to return. Birds built nests among its limbs. Rivers found new paths. Mountains cooled. What had been destroyed would never be the same, but from that ending a truer world could rise. The halls of Asgard were gone. Valhalla was silent, but in that silence was space for stories to begin again. Not tales of giants and thunder, but of harmony, of the earth reborn, of humans learning to live without gods watching overhead. And perhaps, just perhaps, the gods were not truly gone. Perhaps they had become something else. Whispers in wind, fire in the hearth, memory in the stones. Not rulers but roots. Not warriors but songs. The sky turned soft blue. Trees rose where bones had fallen. And in the air, the scent of rain on ash. It was not a return to what had been. It was the birth of something new. For even in a world forged by endings, there is always one ember left. And from that ember a flame. And from that flame life. Chapter 15. The Legacy of the Gods, Myths That Never Die. The fire was gone. The thunder had faded. The gods were silent. But still the stories remained. In the valleys of Midgard, around the campfires of the new people, whispers began to take form, old names spoken in reverence. Children who had never seen a god pointed to the sky and asked about the one-eyed wanderer who watched from beyond the stars. And somewhere Odin's shadow stirred. They spoke of Thor, the hammer-wielder, whose footsteps shook mountains and whose laugh chased away storms. They said when thunder rolled across the sky, it was his sons, Modi and Magni, remembering him in battle cries. And in the spark of lightning, some still claimed to see the flicker of his hammer's light. The world was new, yet it bore the fingerprints of what had come before. Mountains still bore names whispered in old tongues. Rivers carried the echoes of goddess tears. And deep forests murmured with the voices of long-lost giants. The myths had not vanished. They had become part of the world's bones. The great tree Yggdrasil, scarred but unbroken, still stood at the center of it all. Its branches no longer carried the weight of 9 realms, but within its bark were the rings of time, marking every war, every birth, every sacrifice. People came to sit beneath it not to pray, but to listen. In that silence they felt something, not presence exactly, but memory woven into the wind. As if Baldur's light still danced between the leaves. As if Frigg's sorrow fed the roots with ancient love. as if Loki's laughter could still be heard on the edge of a storm. The myths passed from tongue to tongue, changing slightly each time. In one version, Heimdall stood to the end. In another, Loki wept before Ragnarök began. Truth didn't matter. What mattered was that the gods had become eternal, not through their might, but through the stories told in their name. There were no temples now, no gold, no great feasts in the halls of Valhalla, but in every moment of bravery, every act of loyalty, every painful betrayal or tragic fall, the gods lived on, mirrored in the hearts of those who dared to feel deeply, love fully, and fight boldly. They had become more than beings. They were now archetypes, reflections of the divine and monstrous within us all. Odin's wisdom, Thor's rage, Loki's cunning, Tyr's sacrifice, Freya's fire. They were not just gods. They were parts of the human soul, given names and stories to carry them forward. And perhaps that is all a god ever needs. Not immortality in flesh, but remembrance in story. The kind passed through generations like an heirloom, like a whispered secret carried in the blood. When the stars shine cold on winter nights, and the frost glitters beneath the moon, some still believe that the old world sleeps, just beneath the surface. That one day, when the wind shifts just right, the horn of Heimdall may sound again. And this time not for war but for reunion. But even if it never comes, the gods have already achieved the one victory that matters. They did not live forever, but they were never forgotten. Because in the end, that is the truest kind of power. To become legend,